In 1977, a drug lord sends the United States an offer that sounds like a nightmare. Pay me $100 million or I will poison your country. His name is Kun Sa, and he's not bluffing. At his peak, he controls heroin on a scale that feels unreal. About 40% of the heroin on American streets is traced back to his jungle laboratories. The consequence is brutal. 1 in 4 U.S. overdoses is linked to his supply. From New York to Los Angeles, emergency rooms choke on the damage. But what makes this story darker, almost unbearable, is this. The CIA helped create him. Their covert proxies supplied the first weapons. Their training camps taught the tactics. They helped shape the man who would later hold America hostage. Washington responds with everything it can throw. A $2 million bounty, a federal indictment, and what's described as the largest multinational drug sting ever attempted. They spent 2 decades trying to destroy him. And yet, Kun Sa still dies in 2007, in a villa with his fortune, surrounded by family, having never spent a single day in an American prison cell. So how does a jungle warlord beat a superpower? To understand, you have to go back to a place where law dissolves into raw power, the Golden Triangle around 1950, where Burma, Laos, and Thailand collide in a knot of jungle-covered mountains. Out there are no rules, only strength. And in 1950, strength belongs to the Kuomintang, KMT, the remnants of Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist Chinese army. After Mao's communists seized China in 1949, more than 12,000 soldiers pushed into these lawless highlands, stranded, stateless, desperate, and secretly funded by the CIA. To Washington, there are weapon guerrillas who can harass communist China from the south. The CIA supplies weapons, gold, military advisors. But what Washington doesn't see is a teenager standing at the edge of those training sessions, a half Shan, half Chinese boy named Chang Chi-fu. He watches everything, quietly, obsessively, memorizing the craft of violence, how to strip and reassemble a rifle blindfolded, how to lay an ambush in dense jungle, how to read terrain like a map to power, and most importantly, how to turn violence into profit and profit into control. The CIA is training its future nightmare and has no idea. By his early 20s, Chang Chi-fu commands his own militia, small, hungry, dangerous. He starts with protection rackets, extorting opium farmers in remote Shan villages where there's no police to call and no government that cares. But here's what separates him from every other jungle thug fighting over scraps. Chang Chi-fu thinks in systems. He doesn't just want to steal opium. He wants to control the entire supply chain, from the poppy fields to the refineries to the smuggling routes to the foreign distributors. And then in 1963, he makes a deal that will define his entire career and bend the trajectory of the global drug trade. By 1963, the Burmese military is facing a problem it cannot solve. Communist insurgents are spreading near the Chinese border, slipping through jungle terrain the army barely controls. Conventional forces are ineffective. What they need are fighters who know the mountains, who can live off the land, and who are willing to fight without rules. That's when Chang Chi-fu steps forward. He offers his private militia to fight the communists on the government's behalf. In return, the Burmese military gives him something far more valuable than money, weapons, or territory: immunity, official protection, no arrests, no interference, no questions asked. He is free to traffic as much opium as he wants, openly, as long as his men keep the insurgents in check. In a single decision, the Burmese state hands a future drug emperor his first license to operate. The effects are immediate. Within 2 years, Chang Chi-fu's forces are better armed than the Burmese army itself. Truckloads of black market weapons flow into his camps: rifles, machine guns, mortars. His fighters train with discipline copied directly from the CIA-backed Kuomintang units he once observed in silence. Word spreads fast through the Golden Triangle. His name is no longer whispered as rumor. It's spoken with fear. But Chang Chi-fu isn't interested in being a protected middleman or a regional enforcer. He doesn't want a slice of the trade. He wants total control. Not just the opium, but the entire system, from poppy fields to refineries, from smuggling routes to foreign distributors. In the spring of 1967, he makes a move so reckless it shocks everyone who hears about it. 500 armed men march through narrow mountain passes. 300 mules stretch in a line nearly half a mile long. Each animal is loaded with raw opium worth a fortune on the international market. And Chang Chi-fu sends this caravan directly into territory controlled by the Kuomintang, the same forces that trained him, the same networks that have dominated the Golden Triangle drug trade for over a decade. This isn't business. It's a declaration of war. For days, the convoy snakes through jungle trails, guards scanning the tree line for ambushes. Then near the Laotian border, the jungle erupts. Gunfire explodes from multiple directions at once. Kuomintang fighters have been waiting, furious at the betrayal. Laotian army units join the attack, hoping to seize the shipment for themselves. What follows is a three-way massacre over 16 tons of opium. Mules collapse under gunfire, men scream and fall. Then Laotian aircraft arrive overhead. Bombs tear into the forest, turning the jungle floor into fire and shrapnel. When the smoke clears, Chang Chi-fu has lost everything. The shipment is destroyed or seized. His men are dead or scattered. His aura of invincibility is gone in a single afternoon. At just 33 years old, he barely escapes with his life, disappearing into the jungle with a handful of survivors. His enemies celebrate. The Kuomintang believe they've crushed a rival. The Burmese government decides he's become a liability. And in October 1969, when Chang Chi-fu steps off a plane for what he thinks is a routine trip, security forces close in. He's arrested, charged with treason, shackled, and thrown into a prison cell in Mandalay. His empire is finished. At least that's what everyone believes. But what they've really done is give a future legend 5 uninterrupted years to think and to become Kun Sa. Mandalay prison is where empires are supposed to die. Thick concrete walls, silence stretching for years, isolation that breaks most men long before it reforms them. Chang Chi-fu enters at 35 years old with everything stripped away, his army shattered, his reputation destroyed, his future erased. The jungle prince is expected to rot in the dark and be forgotten, but instead of collapsing, he does something far more dangerous, he thinks. With nothing but time, Chang Chi-fu begins to consume every book he can get his hands on, obsessing over military philosophy, especially Sun Tzu's The Art of War. He copies passages, rewrites ideas, internalizes one principle above all others. In politics, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only interests that shift with gain and loss. Loyalty is an illusion. Sentiment is a weakness. Every alliance is temporary, every relationship a transaction awaiting to be exploited. He enters prison as a warlord driven by emotion and revenge. He leaves it as something colder, sharper, a pure strategist who sees people as chess pieces to be moved, sacrificed, or discarded without hesitation. Outside those prison walls, his most loyal followers refuse to let his name die. They wait, they plan, and in 1973, they execute one of the most audacious rescue operations in Burmese criminal history. 2 Soviet doctors working in rural Burma are kidnapped. The ransom isn't money, it's Chang Chi-fu's freedom. The Burmese government faces an impossible choice: release a convicted traitor and lose face internationally, or let Soviet citizens die and trigger Moscow's fury at the height of the Cold War. They blink. In 1974, after 5 years behind bars, Chang Chi-fu walks out of prison and vanishes across the Thai border. The government assumes he's broken, grateful to be alive, finished as a threat. They are catastrophically wrong. Within 2 years, he rebuilds everything and reinvents himself completely. He takes a new name, Kun Sa, meaning prosperous prince of the Shan, but the name is of only the surface of the transformation. He declares himself a freedom fighter for Shan independence, a revolutionary hero resisting Burmese oppression. It's a propaganda masterstroke. The Shan people, long neglected and marginalized, embrace him as their champion. They don't see the heroin refineries hidden in the jungle. They see the schools he builds, the clinics he funds, the roads he carves through forgotten villages. Kun Sa has learned the most powerful lesson of all: wrap your crimes in a flag, and people will die for you. They will protect you. They will hide you. By 1976, he commands a reborn army. By 1977, he operates from a fortified base in northern Thailand, complete with barracks, artillery, and anti-aircraft missiles. Thai generals look the other way because he's useful, as a buffer against communist insurgents. The man trained indirectly by American intelligence has become an American-tolerated warlord. But Kun Sa isn't satisfied with regional power. He wants the world to know exactly who he is, and he's about to make the United States an offer it will never forget. By 1977, Kun Sa is no longer hiding in the jungle. He's entrenched, fortified, untouchable. From a heavily defended base in northern Thailand, surrounded by artillery, anti-aircraft weapons, and loyal troops, he controls the arteries of the Golden Triangle drug trade. Thai generals look the other way because he serves a purpose, as a buffer against communist insurgents. The man, indirectly shaped by American Cold War strategy, has become an American-tolerated warlord. But Kun Sa wants more than survival. He wants recognition. He wants leverage. And most of all, he wants to prove that power doesn't belong to governments. It belongs to whoever controls supply. So he makes a move no drug lord before him has dared. He reaches out to the United States. Through intermediaries, a message is delivered to Congressman Lester Wolf, chairman of the House Select Committee on Narcotics. The proposal sounds almost reasonable on the surface. Pay $100 million, Kun Sa says, and he will sell the U.S. government his entire opium stockpile directly, invest in development for the Shan people, and he will retire from the drug trade forever. But beneath the polite language is a threat so blatant it's almost obscene. Kun Sa isn't offering peace. He's offering a choice. He controls the largest heroin supply on Earth. He can remove it from the market, or he can flood American cities with it. One way or another, America will pay. This is blackmail dressed up as diplomacy, a criminal holding a superpower hostage. Inside Washington, the offer sparks a panic and debate. Some pragmatists quietly wonder if paying one man could really eliminate a third of the world's heroin supply. But the White House refuses outright. Paying criminals would set a precedent too dangerous to consider. They publicly denounce the proposal as extortion and vow never to negotiate with narco-terrorists. When Kun Sa receives the rejection in his jungle headquarters, he smiles. He was counting on it. The offer was never meant to be accepted. It was a warning. And now, with America's refusal, he has justification to unleash what comes next. If the United States won't buy him off, it will bleed instead. Kun Sa decides to do something no drug lord has ever done at this scale. He industrializes death. He transforms heroin production from a scattered cottage industry into factory-level manufacturing. The 1980s mark a turning point. He relocates deeper into Shan State, beyond Thai reach, where pressure from Washington can't touch him. There, in the jungle, he builds something unprecedented, a narco-state, a functioning government with its own army, its own economy, and a singular industrial mission, producing heroin. Dozens of laboratories run day and night, refining raw opium into near-pure heroin at levels never seen before. What once reached American streets at 3 to 5% purity now arrives in many times stronger. Thousands of kilograms pour out every month. Western drug enforcement officials call it an industrial revolution of death, and the numbers prove them right. Within a decade, heroin from the Golden Triangle dominates U.S. cities. Emergency rooms overflow. Overdose deaths spike. And one man's jungle empire sits at the center of it all. America has made its choice. And now, Kun Sa is going to make them live with it. By the early 1980s, Kun Sa is no longer just a trafficker. He is a ruler. Deep inside Shan State, beyond the reach of Thai authorities and far from any meaningful Burmese control, he builds something the modern world has rarely seen, a fully functioning narco-state. Not a gang, not a cartel, a state with borders, institutions, and an army. At the center of it all is his greatest weapon, not guns, not missiles, but chemistry. Dozens of heroin laboratories operate around the clock, hidden beneath jungle canopies. Raw opium flows in from poppy fields and comes out as number 4 heroin, refined to near-industrial purity. Before Kun Sa, heroin reaching American streets was typically diluted down to 3 to 5%. His product is exponentially stronger, cleaner, deadlier, and produced at scale. This changes everything. What was once a fragmented, inefficient trade becomes an assembly line of death. Thousands of kilograms leave the jungle every month. Western drug enforcement officials struggle to find language strong enough to describe it. They call it an industrial revolution of death. To protect the system, Kun Sa builds an army that rivals national militaries. By 1985, he unites Shan warlords under his command and forms the Mong Thai Army, around 18,000 regular soldiers, 5,000 trained reserves, and 8,000 Waisaner village militia. Spread across his territory, that's more than 30,000 Wanzut fighters, armed with mortars, rockets, machine guns, and shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles capable of downing helicopters. For perspective, that force is larger than the standing armies of many UN member states. Inside his borders, Kun Sa establishes schools, hospitals, tax collectors, and even a puppet political body meant to resemble a parliament. To the outside world, he's a drug lord. To many Shan villagers, he's the only government they've ever known. He builds roads where the state builds nothing. He offers security where the state offers only airstrikes and neglect. And it works. By the late 1980s, the numbers could become impossible to ignore. The Golden Triangle's opium output explodes to over 2,500 tons a year, more than half of global supply. By 1989, heroin from this region accounts for up to 80% of the product on New York City streets. U.S. authorities estimate that Khun Sa personally controls around 40% of all heroin entering the United States. Think about that. 4 out of every 10 heroin overdoses in America trace back to one man's jungle laboratories. When foreign journalists risk the journey to interview him, Khun Sa is calm, articulate, almost charming. He insists Westerners will use drugs regardless. He calls himself a businessman meeting demand. And then he places a hand on his chest and claims every dollar funds the Shan struggle for self-determination. Many villagers believe him. The Burmese military, however, knows exactly what he is. But throughout the 1980s, they never truly move against him. The reason is simple and corrosive. Corruption. High-ranking officers quietly collect bribes, profiting from the very trade they condemn in public. Khun Sa's real shield isn't his army. It's the officials paid to look away. What truly separates him from every drug lord before or since is that he doesn't hide. He wants the world to know who he is and what he controls. In 1988, as the U.S. president declares a renewed war on drugs, Khun Sa invites international journalists to his headquarters and does the unthinkable. He declares war back, on camera. He repeats his $100 million offer. He mocks American hypocrisy. He even taunts the DEA directly, smiling as he asks, "Why not use a bandit to catch a bandit?" He isn't running. He's daring the most powerful nation on earth to stop him, and the United States finally responds. A $2 million bounty is placed on his head. Massive seizures follow. One intercepted shipment alone contains 2,000 to 400 kilograms of pure heroin bound for New York. On the street, it would have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars, enough to feed hundreds of thousands of addictions. Khun Sa barely reacts. When you control half the world's supply, losing a few tons is a rounding error. The pressure begins to build, slowly, relentlessly, and for the first time in decades, forces are aligning that Khun Sa cannot buy, cannot threaten, and cannot outrun. By the early 1990s, the balance finally begins to shift. Not because Khun Sa has grown weak, but because the enemies closing in on him are different from anything he's faced before. These aren't governments he can bribe, intimidate, or outweight. These are rivals who want his territory permanently. From the north, the Wa militia rises. They are ruthless, disciplined, and just as comfortable in the jungle as Khun Sa's own men. But unlike previous challengers, the Wa are quietly backed by the Burmese military, which has finally decided that Khun Sa has become more trouble than he's worth. The same state that once protected him is now preparing to erase him. At the same time, the United States launches Operation Tiger Trap, the largest multinational drug sting ever aimed at a single man. This time, the strategy isn't to storm the jungle. It's to strangle the empire from the outside. Working with Thai police and international partners, the DA begins dismantling his network piece by piece. His brokers in Bangkok are arrested. His shipping contacts in Singapore are extradited. His money launderers in Hong Kong watch their accounts freeze overnight. In 1994 alone, 11 of his top lieutenants are captured in coordinated raids across Thailand. For the first time in 20 years, Khun Sa's smuggling routes begin to close. The pipelines that fed his narco state start to dry up. And then something even more dangerous happens. His political cover collapses. Former allies within the Shan nationalist movement defect publicly, accusing him of betraying the cause for personal wealth. The image of the freedom fighter cracks. The myth that protected him for decades begins to rot from the inside. By 1995, Khun Sa is losing on every front at once. Militarily, the Wa are advancing, seizing villages that had been loyal to him for years. Logistically, Thai forces barricade the southern routes his smugglers depend on. Politically, his supporters are turning away. His territory shrinks month by month. His body is failing too. Decades of jungle life, constant stress, and heavy smoking have taken their toll. At 61 years old, intelligence analysts predict an imminent collapse. The DEA prepares what they call the end game, a final siege of his stronghold that they believe will end one of two ways: death in a firefight or extradition in chains. Everyone expects a violent finale, a Scarface ending, burning heroin labs, dead bodyguards, a defiant warlord refusing to surrender. But they forget one thing. Khun Sa has never stopped thinking 3 moves ahead. On January 5th, 1996, the world receives news that makes no sense at all. The Burmese military issues a calm, almost casual statement. Khun Sa has surrendered. Not to the Americans, not to the Thai authorities, not to his enemies. He surrenders to the Burmese government itself. No siege, no battle, no final stand. Khun Sa walks into a Burmese army camp, shakes hands with generals he once fought, and negotiates his own exit from history. And the deal he secures is almost unbelievable. The terms of Khun Sa's surrender were so cynical they almost defied belief. He agreed to disband the Mongdai army and officially walk away from the drug trade. No final battle, no dramatic siege, just a quiet ending on his own terms. In return, the Burmese government gave him exactly what he wanted: total protection. Burma guaranteed that Khun Sa would never, under any circumstances, be extradited to the United States or any other country. He kept his fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars accumulated over 3 decades of heroin trafficking, and was allowed to live freely within Burma's borders for the rest of his life. Washington reacted with fury. The United States immediately demanded extradition, pointing to the 1989 federal indictment in New York. Diplomatic pressure followed, along with protests and threats of sanctions. But Burma's response was short and final. There was no extradition treaty, and none would be negotiated. After years of American sanctions, criticism of human rights abuses, and support for opposition movements, the Burmese military regime had no incentive to cooperate. In fact, protecting Khun Sa became a statement of defiance. He had found the one place on Earth where American legal power simply could not reach. Khun Sa moved into a guarded villa in Yangon, far from the jungle where he had built his empire. The warlord faded into civilian life. Over the years, he reinvested his drug fortune into legitimate businesses: real estate during a period of rapid urban growth, a nationwide bus transportation company, and ruby mining operations in Burma's gem-rich regions. When journalists occasionally managed to interview him, he presented himself as a quiet businessman, speaking nostalgically about his past as a revolutionary and carefully avoiding the subject of heroin. The transformation was complete. Warlord became prisoner. Prisoner became freedom fighter. Freedom fighter became drug emperor. And finally, the drug emperor became a retired entrepreneur. Each identity was adopted when useful and discarded when it no longer served him. The DEA kept his indictment active for another 11 years. Diplomatic complaints were filed year after year. None of it mattered. Khun Sa remained in Yangon, protected by a government that had no reason to surrender him and every reason to keep him silent. On October 26, 2007, Khun Sa died of natural causes at the age of 73. He never stood in an American courtroom. He never wore handcuffs on U.S. soil. The man responsible for flooding the world with heroin escaped justice entirely. And that is the final irony of his story. Khun Sa didn't defeat the United States with armies or weapons. He won by understanding power, by knowing exactly where the reach of a superpower ends, and how to step just beyond it.